Chapter 5. Mantra. Once there was an Englishman, a district collector, who told his servant, "When any great saint comes, tell me. I want to get jnana from him." Vimalananda and I were sitting in Pune. It was mid-morning. Breakfast was over. The preparations for lunch were underway, and he was in a good mood. One day a saint came to town with a large group of his followers, chanting the name of Krishna, Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam. When the collector's servant saw this, he immediately remembered his master and decided to tell him about the saint, hoping for a reward. When he heard that a saint had come, the collector said to his servant, "Go and make arrangements for my visit. I am coming for jnana." The servant returned to the place where the saint was doing his chanting and started getting everything ready for his boss's visit. A nice chair with a red sash in a prominent spot for him to sit on, and what not. When the saint asked the servant what was going on, the servant replied that a great man was coming. The saint said, "All right, but first remove that chair." The servant said, "If I do that, you don't know what sort of trouble you will be getting yourself into." At that, the saint told his followers to ignore the fellow and start chanting again. When the collector arrived, he ordered everyone to stop singing and said in Hindi, "Look here, I have come for jnana." The saint looked up at him and told him, also in Hindi, "Dear boy, just repeat God's name," and told his followers to resume chanting. The collector asked a second time and received the same reply. He asked a third time, adding, "I don't like this noise." The saint looked at him and said in Hindi, "Shut up, Sala." Sala means brother-in-law. If I call someone my brother-in-law, it means I am sleeping with his sister. This is a serious insult here in India. The collector became absolutely wild on being called a Sala and lost his temper. He shouted, "Now you want to see who I am? Call the police," he said to his servant, "and have this man taken away." The saint asked, "What have I done?" The collector answered, "You have insulted me." "And how was that?" "You called me Sala." Then the saint smiled and said in fluent English, "Now see what has happened to you. One little word has made you uncontrollably angry, and is not even possible for me to be your Sala, because you have no sister. When one bad word can affect you so profoundly, think of what a good effect you would get if you spent your time repeating God's name." The Englishman was stunned. He had never dreamed that the saint knew English. Then suddenly he realized, how could this man know that I have no sister? He immediately prostrated himself to the saint and said, "I have received the wisdom I came for." He went home, bequeathed everything to his servant, and without any delay became a sadhu. I know that the story is true. I met this man in Girnar. This shows you practical proof of the power of God's name. He paused to light a cigarette. A troop of monkeys passed overhead, heading for a nearby cemetery as they did every Saturday. God's name produces results in any language in which you repeat it. Once you approach near to God, and God begins to speak to you, He will speak in your own mother tongue, the one in which you feel most at home. The priests of the various religions will tell you, no, God can speak only in Latin or Sanskrit or Arabic or Hebrew or Pahlavi. But it isn't so. Who created all the languages? He did, capital H. So why can't he speak in any language that he pleases? And likewise, you can speak to God in any language you like, and he will hear you if you are sincere. Because each grouping of sounds has its own phonetic value, however, some languages are better than others for certain purposes. Arabic, for example, is very good for mundane magic, and Sanskrit is very good for creating deities. Each sound of the Sanskrit alphabet is a bija mantra. A bija mantra is a seed which, when planted in the consciousness, gives rise to a certain effect. Repetition of the appropriate bija mantra is a quick way to create the form of the deity you are worshipping, because the vibrations of the sound itself produce the form. But of course, this is applicable only to Indian deities, I interjected. Absolutely not, he countered. Someone who knows the phonetic value of various sounds can create a mantra that will be applicable for any deity. You have worshipped Jesus for so many years. There is a bija mantra for Jesus also. And if you know it, and you know how to use it, you can reach Jesus very quickly. Mantras can be very useful. If this is the case, then why don't more Christians follow this path and get the result? I inquired. Who bothers about these things? He replied indignantly. All the padres are too busy converting other people to worry about their own development. I say, forget about other people and worry about converting yourself. Convert yourself into the form of your deity. That is a real conversion. That is the beauty of Tantra. Mantra Siddhi. Many people talk about Mantra Siddhi, which is the manifestation of the deity inherent in the mantra. But I am afraid that most of them have missed the boat. Let's say that I want to locate you, and I know your name. But that alone is not enough. I must also know what you look like and where you live, because there are maybe many people with the same name. Only if I know your likes and dislikes, your temperament, all the facets of your character, do I really know you. Then I can locate you. It is the same in sadhana. When you call a particular deity with the help of a mantra, which is nothing but the deity's name, you must have a mental image of what he or she looks like. Day after day you call. Where will your beloved go? The deity must come to you, and will come as soon as you forget everything else. At first, you will only be able to draw your deity to you occasionally. Then, as you get onto his or her wavelength, you will be with that deity at all times. This stage is called Tanmayata, or togetherness. Eventually, your own individuality becomes completely dissolved, and you and your deity become one consciousness. When you become identical with your deity, you have reached the stage of Tadrupata. At this stage, there is mantra chaitanya. There is total union of your consciousness and your mantra. Every cell in your body becomes a resonator for your mantra. Every pore becomes a mouth with which you speak God's name. The Tantras maintain that the consciousness of a certain region of the physical body is its deity. Since every mantra is a deity, The entire human body is composed of mantras, and is a mantra itself. By repeating mantras, you are continuously recreating yourself in a new image. Eventually, when you are truly purified, your original personality becomes totally effaced, and only the image of your deity remains. Vimalananda illustrated with a story. One day, while traveling from place to place, a wandering sadhu came upon a boy herding buffaloes. He was hungry, so he asked for some milk to drink, and the boy gave it to him readily. When he had drunk to his satisfaction, the sadhu began to feel generous, and asked the herdsman, "What would you like?" "I'm feeling so fine, I'll give it to you." The boy chuckled and said, "I really don't need anything. I do nothing all day long but herd my buffaloes, and I'm satisfied with that. Besides, Maharaj, you came to me as a beggar and I gave you alms. How can I expect anything from you in return? I am the giver, not you." The sadhu was taken aback by his answer, and realized that this was no ordinary buffalo herd. Then he thought he would do a good turn for the fellow anyway, and asked, "What is it that you love most in the world?" "Why, this buffalo," the boy replied innocently. "The one whose milk you just drank. She is the largest I have. She gives me more than 10 gallons of milk a day, and she is so broad and strong, so loving and beautiful, and well behaved, that I love her best of all." "All right," said the sadhu. "Please do one thing. Go sit in that cave over there and imagine you are this buffalo. Think of her. Keep her picture with you in your mind. Completely self-identify with her. Become her. As you sit, repeat to yourself, 'Bhai Soham, Bhai Soham,' meaning, 'I am a buffalo, I am a buffalo. Don't worry about a thing. I'll look after your buffaloes.'" The herdsman did as the sadhu instructed, and when after 3 days the sadhu entered the cave to check on the boy, he found him sitting motionless with his eyes closed, repeating, "Bhai Soham, Bhai Soham." Then the sadhu said, "So, young buffalo herd, how have you progressed? Come out now." The herdsman answered, "Don't call me a buffalo herd. I am a buffalo. Can't you see that? Look at my broad back. How can I leave this cave? My horns are too broad to go through the entrance. Now don't be foolish. Go away and leave me alone, or I'll gore you and toss you out with these beautiful horns of mine." But the sadhu persisted and said, "Try to remember, my boy. I told you to sit and do this. Now, instead of repeating, 'I am a buffalo, I am a buffalo,' start to try to identify with Shiva. Repeat, 'Shivoham, Shivoham,' meaning, 'I am Shiva, I am Shiva.'" The herdsman did that, and in about 15 minutes he was in a deep trance. He realized his goal, the universal soul in the form of Lord Shiva. The sadhu was astonished. Tears came to his eyes, and he said to himself, "This fellow sits only 3.5 days and achieves, and I have wandered around practicing without success for years and years." Then he had to take that buffalo herd as his guru, and finally he also realized that the buffalo herd could achieve so quickly is of course the result of preparation from previous births. The same thing happened to Ramakrishna Paramahasa. What took his guru 30 years to achieve, Ramakrishna achieved in a few days. Time is not the criterion. If the desire is strong enough, the result must occur without delay. You must forget everything except the name and form of your deity. Then you can achieve the highest. Is Soham the same as Shivoham? I asked. Not exactly. Many saints tell their disciples to repeat Soham, which means Sa Aham, I am He. He meaning the universal self in its formless aspect. This is all very fine, except that it is not quite what I desired. It's not so easy to identify with the universal self, which is impossible to imagine, much less put into words. If the mantra is inversed, however, it becomes Hamsa, which is the Bija mantra of Sarasvati, the goddess of learning. Whoever repeats that mantra gets the benefit of Sarasvati's Shakti, which will lead the repeater step by step to Soham. It is always the mother who shows the child the face of its father, as Bhavartani Ma did for Ramakrishna. The sadhu gave the boy a name and form on which to concentrate his mind, because he had to do some preliminary work, no matter how minimal, with the help of a form. Both name and form are essential for worship. One part of the mind takes the shape of an object. That is form. Another part of the mind identifies and distinguishes it. That is name. To go directly to the highest type of samadhi is almost impossible. Even Ramakrishna had to worship Mother Bhavatani for many years before his consciousness became one-pointed enough to achieve the formless. Why a buffalo? A buffalo was the logical choice for the buffalo herd, because he lived around them and loved them. He had a strong affinity for buffaloes. You may not choose a buffalo for your concentration, since after all, a buffalo is the very embodiment of inertness and stupidity. It is tamas personified. You will probably prefer to use a deity to prepare yourself, and that too one with whom you have an affinity. Using mantras. How will I know which form I have an affinity for? That is the job of your guru, to assign you the proper mantra and the proper form. He will know which mantras are appropriate for you. If you are of a very tender nature and you start to repeat a mantra for some terrifying deity like Smashantara, you may scare yourself to death. If you are prone to greed and you worship Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, you may simply enhance your greed, which will not help your progress. This is why a guru is necessary, to teach you what you need to learn. People are amazing nowadays. They tell the guru what they want to learn from him, instead of trying to find out from him what they need to know. Is there anything more ridiculous? You must also be sure that you have the proper form of the deity that goes with your mantra. Otherwise you may waste years in fruitless effort. Most deities have many different forms. For example, it is possible to worship Krishna as a baby, a young boy, a handsome young man, a lover, a king, a warrior, Arjuna's friend, and so on. You can see him in many different forms, including even his universal form. But name and form are identical, so each different form must have a different name, a different mantra. Without a guru's help, how will you know which is best for you? You can only know which is best for you if you have already understood both your own nature and the inherent nature of the deity. It may take tens of years of hard penance for a man to achieve success with a mantra for Anjanya, since most men relate to Anjanya as the greatest of heroes. But a woman can satisfy Anjanya in 10 days. Most people will tell you that women should not worship Anjanya since he is celibate. And this is true in the sense that romantic or erotic love is useless. But Anjanya must respect and love one woman, his mother Anjani. So if a woman worships Anjanya as if she were Anjani, and he were a tiny baby monkey, she can get results very quickly. It's wonderful, isn't it? People worship Lord Krishna in the same way, in the form of Lalu or Gopala, just as they worship the baby Jesus. A man could do the same thing, but men are not innately motherly like women are. It may take a man years to develop real motherliness. Not only must you know the right form of the deity, but you must have perfect faith in that one aspect of the Godhead if you hope to succeed. One whom I've known for several years came to visit me recently and was boasting that he worships one deity, does japa for a second, prays to a third, and sometimes others as well. How can he ever succeed at propagating one when he divides himself among so many, like a prostitute? Another striking image, the spiritual harlot. And he is not alone. Look in the worship room of almost any Indian and you'll find pictures of images of 15 or 20 gods, goddesses, saints, wonder workers, and what have you. This is just a sign of a chaotic mind. If you ever hope to achieve, you must select one form and stick to it. That is part of niyama. Look at the great poet Saint Tulsidas. When Lord Krishna came to him, he said, "Lord, I know that you are nothing but Vishnu in a different form, and you are in no way any different from Lord Rama. In fact, you are the universal self, but still I prefer to see the form dearest to my heart, my Raghuvira, my heroic Rama." And Krishna smiled and showed it to him. After a brief intermission during which the rice was put on the fire to cook, Vimalananda continued, "Even if you have been given an appropriate mantra, and know the correct form to visualize it, and follow good niyama, you still cannot hope to succeed just by repeating your mantra without any discipline. It is always good to repeat God's name, and so it is good to repeat your mantra all day long, whether you are eating, sleeping, making love, or sitting on the toilet. But do not expect that this will be sufficient to achieve mantra siddhi. For that, you need to follow a specific process called Parasha Charana. For one Parasha Charana, you decide how many repetitions you can do in a year. You must do the same number every day. After you finish, 10% of that amount must be offered as oblations, that is, as offerings into a homa fire. Then 10% of the number of oblations must be offered with water. This is called tarpana. 10% of that number must then be recited as you sprinkle water about your body in a particular way. This is called marjana. Finally, 10% of the number is offered as bhojana, gifts of food, usually to children. When all this is complete, so is your Parasha Charana. In Kali Yuga, they say that you need to do only 3 Parasha Charanas correctly to bring about a mantra's full effects. In truth, if you really desire God to come, He can come in 3 days, or 3 hours, or even the minutest instant. But today, Maya is so strong that very few can do even one Parasha Charana properly. Why do you think Maya tests everyone? Not because she wants to ruin us. Oh no, she is the mother. She has given everything to us. It is because she has to know if our love is really meant for her, or only for her creations, that she tempts us. She loves us so much that she always wants us to get exactly what we want. Because a year is such a long time to follow strict discipline during Kali Yuga, God in His wisdom has established another, easier way of performing a Parasha Charana. According to this reckoning, a Parasha Charana is made up of 3 Anushtanas. One Anushtana is made up of the minimum amount of japa required to perfect the mantra. Before you become so great as to do a full Parasha Charana, you must first succeed at an Anushtana. When we talk about perfecting a mantra, he said pointedly at me, as I furrowed my brow attempting to understand, we mean purifying it, and ourselves, so that it can exert its effects without obstructions, so that its Shakti becomes available to us. The number of japas needed to perfect a mantra varies according to the mantra, but is often 100,000 or more. How many is it for the mantra I am repeating right now? I had been repeating this particular mantra for many months, and a little voice was now telling me, you haven't been paying attention to how many you've been repeating. How will you ever achieve this way? For right now, assume that you are repeating a mantra for which 100,000 repetitions are necessary. Suppose you were to decide to do an Anushtana, to repeat this mantra 100,000 times in a controlled, consistent way. I decided then and there to do so. You can do them in as many ways as you please, but you must do the same number each day. Then you must offer 10% of that number, i.e. 10,000, as Homa. 10% of that, or 1,000, must be offered as Tarpana, 100 as Marjana, and finally you must feed 10 people. Each deity requires a different sort of human mouth. For Anjanya, small boys are needed, for Ma, little girls, and so on. So this is why I should keep track of how many oblations I offer at each Homa, I said. Should I do some of this Tarpana and Marjana and feed people after I do Homa? Of course you should. Then your worship will be complete. Each segment of a Parasha Charana or Anushtana relates to one of the elements. Japa purifies the air and ether elements in you. Homa, the fire element, Tarpana, the water element, and Marjana, the earth element. Bhojana is your final offering to your deity, whom you see in all the people you feed. Unless you know how to apply this sort of knowledge, you can never be successful with any mantra. This is practical Buddha-shuddhi, purification of the 5 great elements which make up the universe, which is the essence of Tantra. You are not yet ready for Panchamakara, so you can begin with this. The 5 S's. Both Anushtanas and Parasha Charanas require you to follow what we call in Sanskrit the path of the 5 S's: Sthana, Samaya, Sankhya, Samagiri, and Samyama. The purpose of these rules is to achieve the Saguna, or manifested form of the deity. You know Sanskrit. translate these words. Sthana means location. So first, you must stay in one location throughout the duration of your penance and not travel about. Moreover, you must sit in the same place each day, face the same direction, and if possible, sit in the same position. Samaya means time. Fix a time limit for your program, 11 days or 40 days or whatever, and stick to it. Also, you must sit at the same time every day. 5 minutes variation here or there is permissible, but no more. If you miss the time, you cannot count the repetitions you do that day in your total. Sankhya means number. You must decide the total number of repetitions you will do, and then divide that number by the number of days to determine how many you will do each day. You don't decide to do 500 and then one day become busy and only do 100, and hope to make up for it by doing 1,000 the next day. You must do the same minimum number every day. You can do more, but you cannot do less, or you cannot count that day. Samagri means the materials used for worship. These must be the same every day. No substitutions permitted. And Samayama? I'm not exactly sure. Probably related to Niyama? Yes. Here, Samyama means complete control of the sexual organ. That means abstinence. Also, a woman cannot count the repetitions she does while she is menstruating. She should not even sit at her normal place of japa. In fact, she should not even visualize intently, since that could imbalance the prana and apana in her body. Menstruation is a time for the body to purify itself. Once it is over, she can resume her previous routine. Only if all 5 of these S's are fulfilled can the performance give results. A sadhaka must be rigid about this. Also, you must concentrate on what you're doing when you do your japa. You cannot do a few repetitions and then start to worry about where your son is or whether your wife is cooking dinner or not. You must throw out all external attention and concentrate on interiority. And you must be careful of your temper. While you are doing your japa, your mind approaches God. If you become angry afterward, all that you have achieved in that department is immediately lost. There may be other restrictions too. For instance, a specific diet may be indicated. Whatever the diet, you should not do japa for up to 2 hours after having a full meal. You should never discuss mantras, astrology, or any related subject for 2 hours after a meal. Why? Because your mind can only concentrate on one thing at a time. And if there is food in your stomach, your mind will have to concentrate on that food in order to digest it. What about fruit or milk? I asked, since that was my diet at the time. At least an hour after eating fruit, and at least half an hour after drinking milk or juice. You should even wait for 15 minutes or more after you have drunk some water. Once you no longer need your mind in order to digest your food, this restriction will no longer apply. But you have to be able to die while still alive in order to do that. Ever the showman, he paused dramatically, but it was only a feint, for he then broke into a smile and said, "Now let us stop here and eat." We went in to lunch. Secrecy. Some days later, when I was in Bombay, I accompanied Vimalananda on an uneventful visit to K, one of his old friends. Afterward, I noticed that Vimalananda was quieter than usual, so after we reached home and had tea, I casually asked him, "Have you known that gentleman for very long?" He replied, "There are many restrictions to follow if you really want to perfect a mantra. One of the most important is that you must never tell anyone which mantra you repeat. When you tell someone else your mantra, you allow them access to the Shakti you are trying to accumulate, which is tantamount to giving them a blank check and asking them to clean out your bank account. Anyone who needs to know your mantra will be able to find out without asking you. Whoever cannot find it out without asking does not need to know." About 20 years ago, K wanted me to give him a mantra to repeat. He pleaded with me so long and so insistently that finally, against my better judgment, I gave in. K was proud of his new acquisition, and when my junior guru Maharaj came to Bombay in 1959 and K came to pay his respects, Guru Maharaj asked him what kind of sadhana he was doing. K told him, "Vimalananda has given me a mantra which I am repeating regularly with great care." Now Guru Maharaj did not ask K about his sadhana because he wanted to know about it. He already knew about it. Finding out such things is child's play for him. He asked because he wanted to know how solid K's dedication to sadhana had become. When Guru Maharaj learned that his dedication was not at all solid, he decided to teach K a lesson. He knew it was not solid because K was willing to speak about it, you mean? That's it. He knew the rules. Anyway, Guru Maharaj got wild and told K, "Who does Babuji," meaning me, he always calls me Babuji, "who does Babuji think he is? God? That he is giving out mantras? Besides, he has not told you the entire mantra. He is trying to keep something from you. He has left out one syllable." K became alarmed. If the mantra was incomplete, he might repeat it for many years and nothing would happen. So he said, "Oh Maharaj, please take pity on me. Tell me the rest of it." Guru Maharaj played his part well. At first he refused, but K begged and pleaded and wheedled so sincerely that eventually Guru Maharaj took pity on him and gave him the additional syllable. The result? Since 1959, K has repeated that mantra faithfully every day for 10 to 12 hours. 10 to 12 hours! He passed the 10 million mark long back and is probably near the 20 million mark now, but there has been no concrete result whatsoever. That extra syllable changed the entire phonetic effect of the mantra's vibration. It didn't belong there, of course. Guru Maharaj added it just to teach K a lesson. But what a lesson! 20 to 30 years of sadhana down the drain. To Guru Maharaj, of course, 20 or 30 years means nothing at all. But to us mortals, it is our lives. It just serves K right for speaking his mantra aloud. I heard stories of Guru Maharaj before, and after meeting him I found him to be as strict as Vimalananda portrayed him. At this stage in my life, however, such stories made me lose all interest in ever meeting Guru Maharaj myself, which is the effect Vimalananda intended. And he was right, of course. Had I met Guru Maharaj, then I would have been lucky to escape still wearing my skin. This is why people hate my Guru Maharaj, Vimalananda continued, noting my reaction with satisfaction. When people come to him, he sees to it that they have a good purge of bad karmas from their causal bodies. All that person knows is that he went to Guru Maharaj and suddenly everything started to go wrong. So Guru Maharaj is blamed. But he doesn't care. You can say he is just doing his job. He's very strict about doing his job, and rarely lets anyone escape if he finds out they are exceeding their limits. His lessons are really tough. Secrecy is always the best policy in sadhana. There is even a proverb to this effect. Maunam sarvata sadhanam. Translate, please. Silence accomplishes everything. Right. Consider this. Whenever we are having a good discussion about spirituality, some idiot always comes along to spoil it. Why? Because God does not like his secrets to be discussed so easily. How much more must he hate to have his mantras spoken? Knowing all these things, I still allowed K to have that mantra. Well, Guru Maharaj taught me a good lesson from this experience too. Test an aspirant thoroughly before you teach him or her anything. If you give a monkey a razor, do you think he will shave himself or chop his neck? Very few people can understand the sort of play I have with my mentors. I certainly didn't understand it. If I were to put my mind to it, he went on, no one, including you, would ever be able to get anything out of me. Once, when I was living the life of a naked sadhu in Girnar, some Baba heard about me and came to me to see what sort of knowledge he could extract. He brought me a 5-barreled chillum, which is a straight pipe, along with him, and filled each barrel with a different sort of intoxicant. One held marijuana, another hashish, a third opium, a fourth chendol, and I don't recall what was in the fifth. Chendol is certainly the worst. I don't know what its equivalent is in the West, but it is very, very addictive. The Baba, who thought he was being very smart, didn't realize who he was dealing with. I smoked that chillum and asked for more. He refilled it. I smoked it, and I asked for more. For the third pipeful, all he had left was a piece of hashish the size of a walnut. I finished that too. After I was done, I told him, "All smoked up. I'm so sorry. What I had to tell you has been burned up by all the smoking. Now get out." How did I do it? Well, that's my secret, but it has something to do with mantras. Pronunciation. I could see that mantras were really useful things. Telling your mantra to someone else is fatal, but there are other mistakes which can also ruin you. Mispronunciation is one of the worst. The way a word is pronounced has a lot to do with its meaning. For instance, when you come in and I say, "Hello Robbie, how are you?" with a pleasant voice and a smiling face, how do you feel? I feel like you're in a good mood. Naturally. And so your confidence grows and you ask me questions. But if I just say, "Good morning," in a cold voice, you would immediately think, "Oh, he is off in his mood today," and you would have kept quiet or left. Isn't that it? It is, most certainly. I have done that before. Yes, I know. Well, it is the same with mantras. When the mantra is pronounced precisely and correctly, the result is inevitable. One mantra pronounced in 2 different ways will have 2 very different and perhaps even entirely opposite effects. That is why the Vedas lay such stress on prosody and intonation. You cannot get any benefit from the Veda unless it is pronounced perfectly without any error. No mortals today know how to do this properly. So while I like to listen to you and Freddie recite certain Vedic hymns, I don't want you to recite most other portions of the Veda aloud. The game is not worth the risk. He paused to permit me to demonstrate compliance with his request, which I did by saying, I will remember that advice, and I will pass it on to Freddie. Good. I tell all my children to always recite their mantra silently, mentally, and I want you to do the same thing. How many people can properly pronounce Sanskrit nowadays? Very few. Sanskrit is called a mantric language because each of its words can be used as a mantra. This is why Sanskrit is not to be taught to just everyone. It should be taught only to those who can pronounce it properly, because if the name is incorrect, the form will also be wrong, and then everything will be in a mess. Long ago, conditions were different. Sometimes two rishis would meet and gather all their best disciples together. One rishi would say, "This boy has been reciting such and such a part of the Veda with such and such an intonation, and just look at the result." Then that boy would recite and the result would be demonstrated. The other rishi would then show with one of his own pupils how an entirely different result could be gained by using a different intonation for the same passage. This is how the rishis used to compete. 4 levels of speech. Of course the rishis and their disciples knew how to pronounce Sanskrit properly. Yes, they did, and they knew other things as well, including how to best make use of all 4 levels of speech. As I racked my brain for any information I might have collected on that subject, he continued, "You know, speech is not a product of the mind. Speech is an independent creative faculty, a sense which operates through the mind. Kundalini is the power of an individual's self-expression, which means that speech is simply the verbal expression of Kundalini. This is why the lotuses of the chakra have bija mantras for petals, and why mantras are so important for awakening Kundalini. What sort of speech you use will be determined by where your Kundalini happens to be when you speak. As long as Kundalini is still asleep, or predominantly so, you will speak mainly in gross verbal speech, the speech used habitually by so-called normal people. As she awakens, your speech becomes progressively subtle. The sort of manifestation you can generate with your mantra depends on the sort of speech you use when you repeat it. Whatever a rishi speaks will come to pass, because rishis speak divine words. God's word is very different from your words or my words, because God's ability to create is very different from yours or mine. The 4 levels of speech are, from lowest to highest, Vaikari, Madhyama, Pashyanti, and Para. Vaikari, vocal speech, is only for mundane things. It is physical speech, which has always had an external object. Dullards and ignoramuses like you and me use Vaikari to communicate. Vaikari is only useful for living beings. Once you are dead, you can no longer hear Vaikari. You can hear the thoughts of those you left behind, but not their words, which is probably just as well, since so often humans say one thing when they really mean another. Madhyama, as its name suggests, is midway between the mundane and the spiritual. People who have good intentions use madhyama, which is mental speech, so its object is internal. Pashyanti is only for spiritual things. Pashyanti means seeing with sense. Actually, it is not seeing, it is perception, because the physical organ of sight plays no part, or a very minor part, in it. The eye acts only as a vehicle for this perception. Immortal beings like Naths and Munis, who are aware of the significance of what they speak, use Pashyanti. And Para is meant only for rishis. It is beyond perception. It is telepathic speech, the highest. In Satya Yuga, almost everyone communicates telepathically by using Para. Even in Satya Yuga, though, there are very few bad apples in the barrel. A few people whose consciousnesses are relatively impure, whose natures are more animalistic than the others. These people use Pashyanti and Madhyama, which are still basically non-verbal forms of communication, but much grosser than Para. When most people in the world can no longer communicate by Para, you know that Satya Yuga is over. Satya Yuga is Satya, truthful, because of Para, which can never be false. Satya Yuga lasts for eons because it is so full of truth. People can do better sadhana in Satya Yuga than we can now, because they can speak in Para. Anything spoken in Para is millions of times more powerful than anything spoken in any other form of speech, especially Vaikari. You should never express your love for anyone in Vaikari. The fire in your tongue will only burn it. If you want to express love, whether for a person or a deity, always use at least Madhyama, if not Pashyanti or Para. This is why kissing is so wonderful. When kissing, you cannot repeat your mantra in Vaikari, and you may not remember to repeat it in Madhyama either. Probably whatever you communicate will be in something higher. Just as in Vajroli, meaning sexual yoga, give and take of energy is possible through kissing. Passing energy through a kiss is 100 times easier than passing energy through Vajroli, because much less energy is involved. If you have the intention to share your energy with someone when you kiss them, even if you have no idea of the technique, some transmission will occur, though it will be less efficient. Kissing with the lips still leads to loss of energy, however. Some energy does get transmitted, but most is lost because the attention gets trapped in the softness of the lips. In the past, people used to kiss only on the forehead. As time went on, they gradually moved down the face until they got to the lips. Kissing with the lips usually leads to sexual intercourse. The upper and lower lips are related. Kissing so that the underside of the tongue is involved stirs up the most energy because of the many nerves there. But what is the use of stirring up a lot of energy if you can't communicate well in Pashyanti or Para? Then very little of your energy will be successfully transmitted during intercourse. Most of it will be burned off in passion. This is Kali Yuga, when Maya, including especially the Maya of the body, is very strong. Vaikari, Madhyama, and Pashyanti are predominated by Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva respectively. Since the world as we know it, Maya, is the result of these three gunas. The use of these three forms of speech is limited, imperfect, because they all exist within Maya. The state beyond the gunas is the state beyond Maya. That state is perfect because it is absolute, and that is para. There is no need for mantra in para. Mantras arise as the intent filters down into the grosser levels of existence. Look at it this way. With the help of the sacred syllable Om, the 3.5 coils of the Kundalini represent the 3.5 letters of the word Om, A-U-M, and Anusvara, meaning nasalization, at the end. But Om also has a bindu, meaning orthographic dot, over the Anusvara. Anusvara and bindu cannot exist without one another. Bindu is a point, position without dimension, as they define it in mathematics. Anusvara is pronounceable in Vaikari and Madhyama, but bindu can be pronounced only in Pashyanti and Para. How do you pronounce a dot? You cannot, but the intention to pronounce it can be present. Intention counts for nothing in Vaikari. A clever con artist can have you in tears while he is laughing inside over how easily he has duped you. Intention counts for something in Madhyama, and for a lot in Pashyanti, but intention counts for everything in Para. In fact, Para is nothing but intention, the purified intention of a purified ego, a Kundalini Shakti which has been magnified millions of times by intense penance. Bindu is used when the Kundalini moves from the Vishuddha chakra into the Agnya chakra, when Shunya begins. That is the very nature of Bindu, emptiness, which is the source of all sound, the field from which sound arises. It seemed complex, so Vimalananda provided me with an Ayurvedic image. Here is another way to look at it. What is the word for sweet in Sanskrit? Swadu or Madhura? Of all the sweet things in the world, only honey is called Madhu, because only honey can offer sweetness to the body without being digested first. This is because honey has already been digested by the bees. Madhura has an extra Ra in it. That Ra refers to the fire element. Anything that is Madhura must first be digested before its sweetness can be released into the system. Of all forms of speech, only Para is truly Madhu. Para goes directly to its target and exerts its effect immediately, just as honey does in the body. All other speech must first be digested by the hearer before its effect can be felt. Pashyanti is always Madhura, at least, and Madhyama usually is, which is why they are so useful. But Vaikari is only sometimes sweet, because it is under the control of all 6 tastes. This is why sometimes we speak sweetly, and at other times our words are sharp, or bitter, or sour, or salty, or cold and hard. The 4 classes. And all this is due to the chemical composition of the speaker's consciousness, I volunteered, as I thought I knew which direction Vimalananda's discourse was heading. He nodded his assent. And this chemical composition determines what sort of sadhana is appropriate for you, what you can succeed at. There is no lack of people today who claim to have located the keys to the Vedas, and who claim they are living a Vedic life, and teaching their disciples Vedic sadhanas. Most of them are gasbagging. They are talking out of their wits. Think for a moment about the caste system. India has been plagued by casteism for centuries, but the caste system started out as something quite different from what it has become. The Vedic literature talks of the body of society in this way. The Brahmanas or priestly class are the head, the Kshatriyas or ruling class, the arms and chest, the Vaishyas or merchant class, the abdomen, and the Shudras or laborers, the feet. Some imperialist Brahmanas have used this description to justify their dominion of everyone else, but the reason for this classification was to illustrate the innate tendencies of each group. Suppose you want to teach a mantra to a child. If the child is a Brahmana, he or she will use the mantra to gain knowledge. The head represents knowledge. A true Brahmana will use this knowledge for self-realization and to assist others to realize. Any Brahmana who uses knowledge to control others is a false Brahmana. Brahman jati iti Brahmana, meaning a Brahmana is he who knows the absolute reality. So how many true Brahmanas do we have today? Almost none. If you teach a mantra to a Kshatriya, you can be sure that he will go out and use it. This is what the chest and arms are for, to do things. And because Kshatriyas are natural rulers, they will tend to use the power they gain from austerities to conquer others. Kshatriyas can go much, much further with penance than Brahmanas can, because Kshatriyas have a natural immunity to pain and an innate belief in kill or be killed, succeed or die. Once a Kshatriya starts something, either he will finish it or it will finish him. A Brahmana often tries to do 10 things at once, motivated by intellectual curiosity. A Kshatriya does only one, but does a thorough job of that one. King Vishwamitra was easily defeated by the Rishi Vasishta's spiritual power when Vishwamitra and his army tried to steal Nandini, the wish-fulfilling cow, from Vasishta. This defeat made Vishwamitra realize that physical might was infinitely inferior to spiritual prowess, and he decided to perform austerities until Vasishta himself acknowledged him as a Brahma Rishi, meaning a god among rishis. Once he decided upon his course of action, he forgot everything else and concentrated on it alone. Vishwamitra performed terrific austerities and was awarded various divine titles by various divine beings, but not the title he wanted. Eventually, he decided to force Vasishta to give him what he wanted. He was born a king after all, and kings are accustomed to getting what they want. Vishwamitra harried Vasishta mercilessly, but nothing seemed to affect Vasishta, not even the death of all his many sons. Finally, Vishwamitra became totally desperate and crept up in the underbrush near Vasishta's ashram, holding a sharp knife with which to murder the rishi who would not acknowledge his accomplishments. Just as he was getting ready to strike, he heard Vasishta say to his wife Arundhati, "Of all the rishis today, only one deserves the title of Brahma Rishi, and that is Vishwamitra. I don't know why he is so much against me. How have I offended him?" When he heard these words, Vishwamitra dropped his knife and ran to bow at Vasishta's feet, saying, "Please forgive me." Vasishta murmured, "But Brahma Rishi, there is no need for forgiveness. I am honored at your visit. And he blessed him. It was all Vasishta's play after all. The play of the rishis is something that is very difficult to fathom. A real Brahmana is too refined to be the kind of monomaniac that Vishvamitra became. But then, Vishvamitra achieved towering heights because of his one-pointed determination. Brahmanas are not better than Kashistras, nor Kashistras better than Brahmanas. They are different. That's all. A good Brahmana tends to develop Kshatriya fearlessness, and a good Kshatriya, as he accumulates knowledge, should become more like a Brahmana. A good king is never a good fighter. It is impossible. To fight, one must be willing to kill, and killing always introduces crudeness into your nature. A good king is always absolutely refined and sophisticated, and such people are absolutely no good on the battlefield. Anyone who is a Vaishya, a merchant by nature, will commercialize the knowledge he or she is given. He will sell it to fill his belly. Look at what is happening in America. Almost all Americans are born business people, and they have merchandised whatever jnana they have received. It is part of their nature. And Shudras? Shudras are people who have to slog. It is important to know all of this, and to know how to recognize these classes of people. If you teach a mantra to a child and he or she misuses it, part of the bad karma comes onto you, because you taught it, enabling him or her to abuse it thereby. You say that this business of caste depends on your own inherent nature. What about this business that you have to stay in the caste you were born in? This is a more recent addition. Every human has a physical and mental heredity. Your physical heredity is the inheritance of all your ancestors. If your forefathers had been warriors for the past several generations, the genes which produce aggression will be reinforced in you, and you will most likely make good warrior material. This was the basis for the old caste system. Originally, the caste system was not rigid. You could do whatever you liked with your life. But if you were born into a family whose traditional occupation had been business for many generations, it is probable that the genes controlling the skills needed to do business would have been reinforced through each successive generation, and you would naturally take to business like a fish takes to water. It would literally be in your blood, in each cell, in your genes and chromosomes. Darwin understood a little bit about heredity, but he applied it too exclusively to physical characteristics. In fact, the principle of natural selection applies to society as well. If you are a businessman and you have 3 children, you will most likely leave the family concern to the child who shows greatest aptitude for the business. And if this happens for 15 or 20 or 30 generations in a row, the business genes will become stronger and stronger as a result of this natural selection. This is what happened for centuries in my own family. We have been businessmen for more than 15 generations. Because the rishis understood all about genetics, they inaugurated the Gotra system. Each rishi had a different field of expertise and could manipulate the genes and chromosomes of his disciple to make them fit to receive the knowledge he wanted to pass down. Each disciple would get a different piece of knowledge. Because this genetic pattern would be passed from generation to generation, the children born into that family would develop tendencies which would make it easy for them to succeed in mastering that branch of the Veda which the rishi had assigned the family. Suppose you want to use the Vedas for your own personal sadhana. First, you must know your gotra, so you can know which branch of the Veda you should study. Then you have to know the mantra and ritual which apply to your branch. But most people have forgotten this mantra and ritual, and so they wander around in the labyrinth and fail to achieve. I know the truth of this. It happened to my own father. He was an authority on the 4 Vedas and their commentaries, but he did not know the mantra and ritual which are appropriate for our branch of the Veda. He did not even bother with the mantra for Bhringu, the rishi who began our gotra. He had his own guru and guru mantra, but if he had first achieved success with the mantra for Bhringu Rishi, Bhringu himself would have taken over and directed his entire progress from then on. This esoteric knowledge was never available to the masses, to whom gotras are important only in marriage negotiations. Marriages within gotras have always been forbidden to prevent inbreeding. The rishis understood eugenics long ago. But marriages within castes were encouraged. Brahmanas marrying Brahmanas, Shudras wedding Shudras, and so on, so that the parents would have a clear idea of what their children would be fit for, and the children would find it easy to fit into their roles, which they were destined to play due to the weight of their inherited karmas. But we live in Kali Yuga now, when everything is jumbled up. If Westerners are by and large innovative and clever, it is partly because they are mixed breeds. Vietnamese marrying Swedes, Nigerians marrying Scots, and so on. This allows new patterns of genes to develop, which tend to promote new ways of looking at things. It also causes lots of uncertainties and difficulties for the children whose new pattern of genes and chromosomes may attract a spirit who has little affinity for the parents who conceived it. This lack of mental affinity may lead to a breakup of the family, since they cannot see eye to eye on many subjects. A child who has become estranged from the family and who cannot find any other place to fit in may become delinquent, which then leads to the breakup of society. So the mixing up of genes has both good and bad effects. Different from your physical heredity is your mental heredity, which you carry with you from birth to birth. Your physical body represents your past, the karmas which you have performed, whose fruits you are now reaping. Your subtle or astral body, which is your mind, is your present condition, and how you use your mind to act in the world determines your future. Every action produces karmas, and all these karmas are stored in your causal body, where they wait patiently for the right moment to project into your mind. If you have been a musician for many births, you will be drawn to music in this birth as well, even if you have to become the son of a farmer because of the weight of your karmas. This is what happened to me. I had no interest in business at all, only in spirituality, because of my work in previous births. This explains why the caste system fails nowadays. Originally, those spirits who had affinity for business would naturally gravitate to the wombs of businessmen's families. Now, stronger influences like runana-bandhana between children and parents operate, which allows persons of differing tendencies to enter the same family. If you are born into a family of priests, and you had been a priest often in your previous births, no problem. But if you are a spiritual type, born into a family of materialists, or an artist born into a family of butchers, there will be conflict. People are reborn with limitations because of the weight of their bad karmas. Those who have accumulated good karmas get the opportunity to be born in a higher state. Any human who has more good karmas than bad karmas will naturally be able to shine out than someone who has more bad karmas than good. The rishis never said that the lower classes of human were animals. They simply recognized that the animalistic nature is greater in those people who have more bad karmas. The rishis always want everyone to make progress according to their own innate abilities, which is only possible when everyone recognizes their limitations. So when I talk about brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, and shudras, I don't necessarily mean those terms to mean castes. The rishis, who believed in free love and were more like today's hippies than like today's bigoted brahmanas, never believed in castes, and neither do I. When I talk about brahmanas or shudras, I mean the innate tendencies of a particular individual, which are determined both by the parents and by the previous births. This is why I call your friend Freddy a brahmana. His brahmanical tendencies are much greater than those of most so-called brahmanas. A human being is by nature either a priest, a ruler, a merchant, or a laborer, and it is very hard to change his nature. We see the importance of pedigree every day at the race course. You can't deny it. You cannot discount human heredity either, but you may be able to go beyond it by sadhana. Which is why having just the right sadhana is very important. Now, can you explain to me the difference between Shuddha and Shudra? I was stumped there. They differ only in one Sanskrit letter. Yes, they do. Shuddha, which means pure, contains dha, which is replaced by ra in Shudra. The Sanskrit letter dha indicates firmness, the power of concentration. Concentration creates purity. You are a chemist. Isn't that what chemistry is all about? Purifying substances so that those substances may be used in concentration? Yes, I guess so. A good play on words. Ra, as you well know, is the bija mantra for fire. In this case, Ra stands for Jatara Agni, the fire of physical digestion. A Shudra is anyone who is concerned more with feeding his belly rather than his mind. All food except milk was once a living being, and even milk is extracted from a living being. We deprive other beings of life in order to preserve our own lives. Is this not extremely selfish? The willingness to kill and eat epitomizes the selfish desire to feed at another's expense. This attitude alone is sufficient to disqualify such a person from studying the Vedas. But there is another, more practical reason. When Jatara Agni is strong, Bhuta Agni is weak, and Bhuta Agni is essential for spiritual progress. Everyone whose Jatara Agni is stronger than their Bhuta Agni is a Shudra, and such people are not fit to recite the Vedas because of the effect of fire on what they speak. This is why I have told you and Freddy not to recite Vedic mantras. Eventually, if your Bhuta Agni becomes very strong, this will no longer be a problem. But for right now, remember that the effect of fire on the Bindu and Anusvara is always R plus NA, Runa, meaning karmic debt. When the fire element in your body acts predominantly on food, it becomes impure, and in that condition, reciting powerful mantras will only add to your karmic debts. Shudras and Mlechas are different, right? Correct. Shudras are not Mlechas. A Shudra lives a life of toil, bringing things to life and then killing them for profit, but still follows the sadhana and retains faith in nature. Shudras are part of the Vedic system, but Mlechas are totally outside of the pale of the Vedas. A Mlecha is, by definition, anyone who loves filth, anyone who loves meat, alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, and other indulgent intoxications, and has few redeeming qualities. Some bigoted Indians call all Westerners Mlechas because they have eaten beef. They are concerned only with outer, not inner purity. Vimalananda knew that I had already been called a Mlecha a few times. They refuse to see how Westerners like you and Freddie have changed their ways, and they also ignore the fact that millions of Indians are adopting the worst of the West and are converting themselves into Mlechas. But why should anyone be trying to do Vedic sadhana at all during Kali Yuga? It's just not possible to do it properly, especially not today when everything has become polluted. Other sadhanas are more appropriate for Kali Yuga. In fact, Kali Yuga is the age in which Shudras are better equipped to realize God than even Brahmanas are. Shudras can get experiences of God which Brahmanas can never aspire to. If you were to meet God in person, what would you do? I'm not sure. You would, I hope, fall at his feet. You would not walk up to him, squeeze his cheeks and say, "Hello there, God, I've come to love you." No, you would prostrate yourself to him. Shudras know how to be humble. Anyone who serves someone else must learn humility. Until you possess sincere humility, you are not fit to touch the feet of God, or even the feet of a good saint. Brahmanas have to overcome the pride they have in their learning. But anyone who is humble can say, "Lord, I am stupid and I know it. You are my only hope. Save me." And he will. Which of these four types are you? I meant it playfully, but Vimalananda's visage solidified perceptibly, and his words became weighty. You want to know who I am? By birth, I am a Vaishya, a merchant's son. By training, I am more advanced than most of the Brahmanas we have in India today. When I do my austerities and rituals, my determination is superior to that of most born Kshatriyas. And when I go to the smashan for sadhana, I am much worse than a Shudra. What I do there, no Shudra would dare to do. It is too horrible for the average person. But then, this is Kali Yuga.